So the metric versus U.S. customary system. Ooh, that's a hot topic and a big debate. But really, it seems like it's a real one-sided thing, doesn't it? Like every video you see and everything you read is like, no-brainer. Everybody should do it. America is just lazy. Come on, isn't it about time?
Can you explain to me?
Yes.
How the country that can send men and hopefully women to the moon,
yeah, all and beyond,
still are in gallons and inches. And when the entire world is metric, I do not understand this.
Well,
my position is the USA cannot and should not go fully metric for a lot of reasons. First, let's grant all the pros of the metric system, based on science, just move the decimal.
1 milliliter of water occupies 1 cubic centimeter, weighs 1 gram, requires 1 calorie of energy to heat up by 1 degree centigrade, which is 1% of the difference between its freezing point and its boiling point.
Sadly, a lot of those arguments and those videos focus on that point only. They pick an arbitrarily difficult calculation to do in the U.S. customary system and compare that to a metric conversion and drop the mic. There we go. America needs to switch. Whoa, that's it? Video's over?
But guess what? It's never going to happen.
It's probably not.
All these videos, posts, academic papers, and so forth stop short of actually explaining how the USA would switch and addresses none of the issues and downsides of going metric. The idea of this video is I hope to point out that practically speaking, the USA switching to metric offers very negligible benefit and would cause immense supernova difficulty, expense, and needless grief. The USA fully going metric would be an absolutely preposterous plan for over 1,000 reasons. Illogical and just absurd. Throughout American history, there have been a lot of pushes to go metric.
Oh, yeah!
They've also had a huge counter push by the Anti-Metric Society as well. Now, these people were not lunatics. They were super smart, well-educated, and ultra-practical people. Is it possible that they brought up some good points? I'll let you be the judge. Well, let's dive in. So let's start off with something that's real easy to grasp. Land. We all know that. We all live on it. We're real familiar with it. That's like one of those human constants. Throughout all of human history, we've worked with land in some fashion or another. In the US, they've got a great system. It's usually the section system, specifically when we're talking about countrysides and so forth and developing, new land in areas. They do it by the square mile. Go figure. In fact, they even set up cities this way. Often the country road system is all based on these exact lines, 1 mile, 1 mile. 1 square mile, but by convention, we call that a section. That's handy, as it breaks down really nicely into 640 acres. What's nice about that is if you cut it in half, it's 320. Cut that in half, it's 160. Cut that in half again, and you got 80. Cut that in half again, and you've got 40. A fairly typical plot of land on the countryside. Wait a second, don't you notice something here? I tell you, if you went thumb drive shopping recently, these numbers 64, 32, 16, 8 would sound real familiar. Powers of 2, my friends. In other words, this system is built such that everything could be cut in halves and doubled very, very easily into common numbers. Of course, not every plot of land follows this exactly, and sure, there's decimals in there, but generally speaking, 640 is a really slick number to use when we're considering dividing up land. In fact, the entire system from the ground up was built with this in mind. Not only the road systems, but of course the road naming conventions, mapping, water lines, electricity posts, of course, plots of lands themselves, deeds to property, cemeteries, you name it. Mail routes, of course, the entire tax structure altogether. Insurance, every form of contract, land rental. In fact, pretty much anything ever written on paper related to land has this woven into it. Come on, America, don't you get it? Metric system is just plain better. You really should switch. Let's walk through it, shall we? Okay, so what do we got here first? Well, 1 square mile, well, that's easy enough. Now these roads are not 1 mile apart anymore. Now they're 1.609344 kilometers. Brilliant. This is so simple. I'm so glad that we're saving you guys the grief and anguish of having 1 square mile. That's just an archaic system. Okay, let's pick an example of a farmer that wants to buy a quarter section. Well, that's fairly understood. We know right away that's 160 acres. Shaboom. End of story. Moving on. If you wanted to break that up into housing plots, oh yeah, 40 a pop, you get 4 of them out of it. Nice. But let's not forget that the U.S. customary system is just a nightmare to do the math. Metric to the rescue. All right, so this is easy. First, you got to take 1.609344 kilometers, and then you got to square it. That means now all of a sudden we're talking about 2.5899 square kilometers. Simple as that. And then you got to move the decimal, but not 2 or 3, because let's not forget, 1 kilometer going back down into meters, in this example is 10 to the power of -3, and we're squaring that. And because these are exponents, we have to multiply them together, equals 6. So that means we got to move the decimal over 6 places. So in this case, the real answer is 2,589,988 square meters. Delightful. From there, you just got to divide by 4. Shaboom. Look, bro, if you've got a better system out there that makes all this math easier, that can magically save this entire situation, I'm all ears. If you want to accuse me and the rest of America for being lazy because they prefer the U.S. customary system, fine, call me lazy. You could also call me reasonable. Even Einstein himself looks at the U.S. customary system in this example for land and definitely gives it the thumbs up. So if you're sitting here telling me that the entire land measurement system in the U.S. has got to go and metric is here to the rescue, you're off to a rough start, my friend, and you got a lot of convincing to do. But by all means, I'd love to hear you out. We're only 1% deep in this whole switch to metric journey here, and it's already a train wreck. But we're just getting started. Let's take a quick peek behind the door of documentation. Like a lot of modern countries, for the most part, America is really well documented. And by that I mean, we've got blueprints, land contracts, deeds to houses, all the way to city ordinances. What about building codes for every single place? What about taxes and tax law? That's all built on acres. Insurance claims, insurance adjustments, payouts. What about all those trust funds that have land measured in acres in them? We need to appreciate that anything having to do with land in America is saturated with the word acre. But let's go there. So if indeed you want to go metric, what you basically got to do is look up every signed contract, every deed on file, and every single office, all current documents and all historic, computer and in paper, every land record ever recorded one by one, and amend them. For example, if it says something ludicrous, such as 80 acres, you have to scratch that out and replace it with 323,748 square meters. You have to amend it. And you have to do that one by one for every piece of documentation ever made in the last 250 years. Whatever argument you have to persuade 100 million people to painstakingly spend decades rewriting and amending everything, well, your argument for going metric better be really compelling. But hey, just for fun, let's suspend reality here for a moment and let's just say we could. While we're at it, let's just assume that all documents in the last 250 years were instantly accessible by everyone who needs it right away. And let's just assume that all employees were sitting around with nothing else to do. And we also got to assume that we're going to have a 100% job satisfaction rate, absolutely. And let's just say this titanic task, it didn't take 100 years, but rather 10 years. What the hell? Let's say we did it in 1 year. Sure, if we're making stuff up anyway. And let's just say we have infinite money to pay people to do this like 2 billion man-hour task. Let's just say we did. We could then sit back in our armchair with a satisfied smile, knowing we finally helped America advance and go metric. Okay, so there's a few nuances in there. One of them is most humans have a 1 to 3% error rate, in an office environment. Congratulations! You just took 1 to 3% of all documents ever made and you just potentially broke them. Yep, invalidated them or put wrong information on there. So if you got about 100,000 documents to start with, after you convert to metric, about, 1,000 to 3,000 of them are now wrong and in error. They weren't before, they are now. And of course, if we're going metric, we have to talk laws here, right? There's a lot of levels of laws as well. We've got our federal law, state law, city law, county law, but then we have building codes, how to make buildings, which are all going to be in feet and inches, my friends. So in order to move forward with metric conversion here, you would have to one by one on every single level of all governments and all institutions and all compliance and inspection organizations of any way, shape, or form, go through all of them one by one. And you'd have to pull up every single law, ordinance, and piece of documentation ever written. I mean, we're talking decades here. And then you'd, once again, have to amend the whole works one by one, line by line, 3% error rate, 1% error rate. Yeah, basically rewrite everything. But one unavoidable nuance is the timeline problem. That means in order for this to work, all levels of government, all levels of industry, across all industries, all have to make the switch correctly and smoothly all in the same day. Let's face it, if it was a slow shift over the course of 20 years, now half, third, 10%, 5%, the documents are two different systems. You just broke it. If one city is set up on meters and laws are set up on meters where the next city is set up on yards, you're going to have problems. You didn't solve anything. You just created a bigger problem. And while you're at it, in order for this to work, you'd actually have to have 100% willing compliance from everybody. 100% of all people to agree on it. Because let's face it, if only 51% agree, you just created two systems. You just broke it. So if you want to make an argument to persuade 100% of all Americans to follow what you're saying, it better be damn persuasive. And now you got the enforcement problem. I mean, let's think about it. If you want to mandate this or push it as a big change, you got to motivate people somehow. It's the only way to make it work. You'd have to make some kind of fine for people that use the U.S. customary system. Yeah, and if you want to speed things up a bit, you could always take a quick page from the French playbook of the 1790s and guillotine a couple thousand heads off. That'd do it. For that matter, you're probably going to need a bunch of metric police that are going around inspecting things, looking over documents, checking compliance with folks. There's going to be a lot of absurd situations. Police officer going up to a sales guy, "Hey, you're not selling any 500-gallon water tanks, are you, sir?" "No, officer. All my water tanks are 1,892.71 liters, officer." "Great, that's better. Just checking. Hate to take you to jail." "Hey, officer, are the jail cells still 6 foot by 8 foot?" "Nah, we upgraded to more modern units that are easier to understand. Now our jail cells are 1.8288 meters by 2.4384 meters. After all, if an inmate shows up from Germany, we'd hate for him to be confused." So what you're proposing is every person who either willingly or unwillingly does not comply is going to get fined, jailed, or somehow punished. After the 1 millionth fine gets issued by the metric police, I wonder what effect that'll have on public opinion. I wonder what % of Americans will view going metric as the savior of the earth is finally here. And what % of people are going to be asking that fundamental question, why? Why? How many lives are we saving here? Why? How much extra money are we making here? None. How much extra clarity have you given to people? None.
And on that note, let us talk about Canada. The Canadian government during the 1970s was very committed to the goal of metrication, but was also aware that changing the country's system of weights and measures this late in the game was not broadly popular with the Canadian public. As a result, the rollout was very slow, a lot of exceptions were made, and enforcement was pretty lax. In 1984, things slowed down even more, and by the 1990s, the issue had long ceased to be anyone's priority. As a result, today, Canadian metrication is this weird sort of half-finished project, like a house that someone started building and just kind of walked away from.
But why stop there? I'm 100% certain if you brought up all your ideas to the NFL, they would gladly have you to their headquarters for a VIP meeting. I'm sure you'll blow their minds with some terrific metric arguments that they've never heard before. Most likely, after one meeting, they're going to switch to a 91.44 meter football field just for you, and happily retroactively go through every statistic and record ever recorded and amend it. They'll be pleased as penguins to walk through that Hall of Fame, deface their heroes, in order to improve and update them to metric. Because you're right. Yards make no sense to anybody. Finally, someone's opened our eyes. I wonder at what point in this journey you'll first start getting some friction. But look, all you gotta do is move the decimal. Those fine folks at the NFL will reply, "You'll be glad to know making billions of dollars as one of the largest sports organizations on earth. We make great use of decimals. In short, we heard of them." If we're going balls deep here, then we really got to start renaming some roads. I mean, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, We need something a little more classy, like 1.609 kilometer road, 4.828 kilometer road. Renaming roads is just the tip of the iceberg, though. Both rural and metro address systems nationwide have all got to be redone, of course. But let's shut our eyes and cross our fingers here. Ideally, nobody will be at all confused during this process, and it can be fully rolled out in less than 50 years. So the real issue is when you overlay metric on top of 1 mile roads, it starts to get needlessly messy. Here's an idea, though. Let's just rebuild the roads. All right, the Armageddon plan. Let's do this.
Oh, yeah!
Rip up every single road, sewer, telephone pole, cemetery, house, housing plot, forest, level it. So going down this path to make America metric would involve multiple versions of the following. First, take a road system with easy math and a simple, perfectly understood structure. Then replace it with a mismatched new numbering system. Next, due to the mismatch, Armageddon and level the entire structure of civilization. Finally, from the ashes, build a brand new civilization that corresponds to the new numbering system, and thereby make the math easy with a simple and perfectly understood structure. Man, that plan sounds like way more work and destruction than it needs to be. Hey man, do you have a lot of practice overhauling large-scale, centuries-old systems embedded into multiple layers of millions of people? If so, that's one hell of a skill set. Good for you. There's plenty of jobs here that would love to hire you. On the other hand, at some point, all folks realize they bit off a little more than they can chew. Something simple like changing a car tire is fairly easy to do for most people. But it's a totally different story, my friend, if you're changing a tire while the truck is going down the road at 70 miles an hour. How about all 16 tires on 1 million moving trucks? Would that be easier or harder?
And although President Reagan signed an act designating the metric system as the preferred system of measurement, he later shut the program down, unwilling to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
But let's think about it and zoom in a little bit. There you are running the bulldozer, destroying a centuries-old family farm to make room for your new 1 kilometer metric road. And the family is in the front yard crying and pleading, "Why? Why are you doing this?" You can confidently respond, "Well, ma'am, we're making way for a more scientific and modern world." After all, from a more scientific perspective, our new kilometer is actually defined as how far light can travel in 3.3356 times 10 to the negative 6 seconds. In contrast, your archaic mile system is how far light can go in 5.3682 times 10 to the negative 6 seconds. See? Huge difference. Meters is way better and less arbitrary, ma'am. It'll be fine, ma'am. In another 100 years, your great-grandchildren will thank you.
This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. The soul's escaping through this hole that is gaping. This world is mine for the taking. Make me king as we move toward a new world order. A normal life is boring.
But if we keep going, what about lyrics to songs, sayings and idioms, movie subtitles? If we're fixing up textbooks, let's fix up all books. Hell, let's go through the great works of history. Book burning! Where does it end? How far you want to go? All right, let's take a breath here. It's true many folks are not proposing America going 100% metric, but just things like dual packaging, maybe medicines, rocket design, scientific research, and in general, give people the choice. Congratulations, you're one step closer to exactly how it works. Oh boy, we've all seen the map, haven't we? Right? Only 3 countries in the world use the imperial system. Just about everyone talking metric will pull this map out. It's the most overused map out there, recycling the same argument. My question is, how complete is it? I'm telling you, more than 1 billion people walking this earth have some familiarity with the imperial system and or use it every day. Let's talk about the sky. How high is the sky? Well, according to the FAA, all airplanes on Earth, airports, pilots, runways, everything, they all use feet when talking about altitude. To be fair, except for China and our friends in North Korea. Fun fact, the only country in the world that is 100% metric is North Korea. Golf courses? Yards. Have you bought a TV or monitor lately? Broadly speaking, worldwide, USA, China, Japan, Egypt, Africa, all TVs are measured and compared in inches. You're welcome to call it a 1.397 meter TV as opposed to 55 inches, if that's more clear and suitable for you. After all, that's what North Korea did. So you're telling me that only 3 countries in the world even use inches? And beyond that, 11 billion tons of goods are transported by sea every year around the world. You'll be quick to notice all those containers are measured in feet, bro. Let's go there. One major argument is we ought to standardize global shipping and trade. For sure, I agree with that. That way all countries can trade easily, and all ports and shipping containers are all compatible. Well, let's take a peek here. Let's see, we got our 40-foot containers, which is 40 foot by 8 foot by 8.5, which is 300 square feet. Nice. Half of that is 20-footers. Nice. 150 square feet, I'll bet. Yep. And half of that would be 10-footers. Let me guess, 75 square feet? Yep. Well, and by the way, you are absolutely welcome to measure this in millimeters if you prefer. The long ones, for example, being 13,710 millimeters by 2,590 millimeters, and they are 2,440 millimeters wide. Go right ahead. What's the area on the inside? Ooh, get out that calculator. There's a lot of nuance in here, but broadly speaking, people just prefer the old slick 10, 20, 40-foot system worldwide. In this example, as you can see, overlaying metric on top of it doesn't really help much. But by all means, we could actually adapt the container to fit the metric system. For example, make it 3 meters, 6 meters, and 12 meters. Perfect. 2.5 meters wide. Brilliant. And then we can do the dimensions a lot easier. That'd be cool. But yeah, that fly in the soup is now you got a new container type that's totally incompatible with any other system in place. Congratulations. Let's just pretend you're the salesman whose company just produced 3, 6, and 12 meter containers, sitting there at the boardroom of Maersk, the shipping people, and you give a beautiful sales pitch extolling the virtues of going metric, and you explain in detail about dividing by 10 and how the metric system really works. Thus, they should buy your container. And don't forget to show them that map where only 3 countries in the world even use feet. That ought to convince them. I tell you, those brilliant men and women, the hundreds of thousands of people that ensure that 11 billion tons of goods gets around this earth, they're some sharp folks. If you've got a better way of doing it, they'll gladly hear you out. Although I imagine their follow-up questions will be a few flavors of why. Why should we rip up and retrofit and rebuild every cargo ship on Earth? Why would we throw away millions of containers and buy yours only? Why would we change the internal dimensions of our containers, thereby affecting their capacity? Why should we spend decades rewriting every single piece of software, contract, tax bill, canal toll, insurance claim, and every record ever written? And why should we redo all stacking systems on every seaport on Earth? Why would we Armageddon an entire functioning system that already makes sense and already makes the math easy? If your foundational argument is standardize the world, you'll be glad to know we manage that, and just so happen to use feet. If you're trying to break that, whose side are you on? Why again do you need $1 trillion in a couple decades to adopt your system and pull this off? Why are you trying to solve a problem I don't have? What was your reasoning again? Oh, outside of 3 countries, nobody has any idea what 40 foot means? And switching to your new metric container would be easier and save us money somehow? I see. So if we're sitting around considering like standardizing the world, if we're going to pick some battles to fight here, I got some ideas. Let's attack some that are 1,000,000 times easier and go from there. The old comma dot swap. Yeah, many countries in the world use a dot to separate thousands and a comma to denote decimals. Other countries do the opposite. So this number, is it 3.5 or 3,500? Well, it depends on where you're from. Yeah, don't worry, it's an easy problem to fix. First, you just got to pick one of the two. Next, you got to somehow force every other belligerent nation on Earth to rip up and rebuild their entire accounting system, money system, reprint all currency, overhaul their entire educational system, timekeeping system, and yeah, entire society.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Oh, and also force them to be cool about it and smile during the entire 50-year process. Go ahead, good sir. And the big question you will not have an answer for is, Why? So is the right side of the road the right side to drive on, or is the left side the right side to drive on? Oh boy, wouldn't that be nice? All we gotta do is repaint every road and intersection, redesign and retrofit thousands of complex traffic ramps across thousands of major cities, instantaneously impose all laws, ... And of course figure out how to swap steering wheel sides on a per vehicle basis. Now I don't know anything about the complexity of ripping out a steering wheel and swapping it internally from one side to the other. A few simple things I can say: it's definitely not free. Doesn't sound easy. It'll never be flawlessly perfect. I can tell you anyone forced to do that's gonna be pissed. And certainly, if you need to do this to 100 million cars, I'm sure it's roughly 100 million times more of a pain in the ass. I'm also sure there'd be entire YouTube channels dedicated to rubbernecking reporting all the crashes around the world resulting from this. If you want to set a new record for the number of traffic fatalities in world history, all you gotta do is simply force half the world to switch sides. Drop the mic. A lot of humans nod for yes and shake their head for no. Many countries are the opposite, my friend. Hey, if you want to single-handedly train billions of humans on how to properly indicate yes and no, I'll pay to watch just for its pure entertainment value. Good luck. Let's talk about time. All countries in the world have some sort of official calendar. The epoch, the starting year, and thus current year, isn't as simple as you think. Our familiar Gregorian calendar, yeah, it's the year 2023. The current Islamic year is 1444 AH. In the Korean Dangun calendar, it's 4356. In North Korea, it's Juche 112. In Thailand, it's BE 2566. We can't even agree what year it is, folks. Does the week begin on Sunday or Monday? Unix time, which is what the internet uses, is measured in seconds since the 1st of January 1970, which is roughly 1.7 billion. But wouldn't it be nice if the whole world just uses the same calendar? Yeah, absolutely, sure. But my point is, that's an unrealistic, fanciful thought with zero consideration on how to actually pull it off. How would you even begin? First, you'd have to prohibit and otherwise prevent anyone from inventing, developing, or using any calendar other than your chosen standard. Oh Lord, to prohibit, eradicate, destroy a religious calendar that's been in use longer than yours? Ooh. You know how fervent some ultra-religious people can be? Why not just insult their religion and persecute their history and see what happens? Somewhere through the smoke of all the burning books, the deaths from the inevitable holy wars, the cries of the imprisoned users of another calendar, more than a handful of people are going to be screaming, why? What's the point? What are you trying to accomplish here? Why not instead spend your resources to help like the billion people get clean water? 2 billion people in poverty. Let's end world hunger, folks. Sparking World War III, the Holy War edition, would be the dumbest use of money, time, resources, technology, and ludicrously short-sighted. Oh, and pointless. For what? Because it would be nice if we all had just one calendar. It'd make trade easier. See, standardize the world. I tell you, it just takes about 20 calories of thinking to realize it's a shit plan. So I bring up these examples as an illustrative thought experiment for you, all of which are about 1 million times easier than suggesting the USA should go fully metric. I trust you realize I'm using the good old-fashioned argument by induction. If cases 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5 obviously don't work, while adding them together definitely won't work, and adding 100 more assuredly would be worse. The USA going fully metric would be like a big pile of 1,000 problems like this all rolled together. You only need one small issue on one front to be a deal breaker for the whole thing. To wave one's hand and broadly suggest that all these problems somehow won't happen or just magically fix themselves would be careless lunacy. I encourage dreaming and development. And I hope that all countries in the world continue to work together and go in a positive way. I love standards. So do most people. I love science, astronomy, engineering, everything. I'm not arguing the merits of metric. I love it, and I'm a supporter. I also have my feet on the ground. There's a difference between the ease of dividing by 10 on a classroom whiteboard and the suggestion to rip up the foundation of an entire society and forcibly compelling 300 million people. That first domino does not automatically hit the next in my mind at all. Breaking something that's not broken? Trying to save people calculation by introducing hundreds of billions of calculations. We think perhaps maybe it'll save some money somehow at some point in the future by spending trillions right now. Actively discouraging a two-system country like the USA from using two systems while standing at the podium of promoting a second new system. Am I the only one who sees the irony? Look, I don't have a wall full of earned PhD diplomas, but I'm no fool either. I can discern between a frivolous, short-sighted pipe dream and what's realistic. I know an impending train wreck when I see it. Claiming that the USA should go 100% metric is a trendy thought paved with great intentions, but a shit plan. Not because metric is bad, not because of lack of education, and not because Americans are too redneck or stubborn to get it. I'm as reasonable as the next guy and open to discussion, and I love innovation. But chances are, you'll never convince me that an undoable multi-trillion-dollar Armageddon overhaul of an entire nation for basically zero practical benefit is a good idea.
I'll accept the kilometer when we accept the euro. Never.